Chris Harrison is stepping down, and Rachel Lindsay says she's done with the Bachelor franchise. We're breaking down everything going on in Bachelor Nation. Hey guys, welcome back to another Shared News from Home. We had an eventful week in Bachelor Nation. We're going to break down a timeline of all the events that led to Chris Harrison announcing he'll be temporarily stepping down. But before we get into it, if you're new here, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell so you don't miss out on any future videos. As always, I'm your host, Fiona Zaring, and I'm joined by the wonderful Mariah Davis. Mariah, there is so much to talk about. I say we just dive right in, and I want to start back where all of this began on last Tuesday. You and I previously discussed Chris's interview with Rachel Lindsay on Extra that led to major backlash from Bachelor Nation. He, of course, attempted to defend some images that surfaced online of Rachael Kirkonnell at an Old South-themed party. And let's just say it was not a good look. After the interview, fans took to Twitter to express their disappointment, and some people even took it so far as to start a petition to have him removed from the show. Chris ended up formally apologizing on Wednesday with a lengthy statement on Instagram. He apologized for taking a stance on topics where he says he should have been better informed. He said in part, quote, "My intentions were simply to ask for grace and offering her an opportunity to speak on her own behalf, but acknowledged that he caused harm by wrongly speaking in a manner that perpetuates racism." He, of course, apologized to fans, to Rachel Lindsay specifically, and he says that he humbly thanks members of Bachelor Nation who called him out and held him accountable. So, Mariah, obviously, this was a huge step, very long statement to break down. What were your thoughts? How did this apology sit with you?
Initially, I thought, okay, he's apologized. That's great. I feel like I say this all the time, and I've had to during this Bachelor season so far. I love when people just take accountability and apologize. But honestly, I revisited the video and saw how intensely he just delivered his truth. And it just makes me question how authentic or genuine his apology was. Is it more because he really does see the error of his ways, or is it more of a, wow, I'm receiving a lot of backlash? I can only imagine his entire family is receiving backlash because that's what people do, honestly. If one goes down, they all go down. So I think it's likely that he can see how hurtful the words were, especially given the fact that Rachel Lindsay, I thought, was one of his good friends. He was overly passionate during the interview and just completely aired out personal opinion without giving a second thought to how that may affect people, what they would feel like afterwards. And I think when people do this and they just air it all out there, they're not contributing to making things better. They're just being more so a part of the problem.
Yeah, and you know what? That's a good point. He and Rachel are, of course, friends. They have had a long relationship. And I think that it was really interesting to see how Bachelor Nation reacted to not only the conversation itself, but the fact that that conversation was with Rachel Lindsay. Obviously, fans were dying to know more from her. We were sort of waiting for her reaction, her take once the interview was out there and the world was taking it in. As we waited for, a more in-depth statement, a very candid response from Rachel Lindsay, other members of Bachelor Nation started to take action. Starting with the women of Matt James's season, they came together to release a joint statement denouncing racism and showing their support for Rachel Lindsay. On Thursday, they shared a statement on their Instagram platforms saying in part, "We are the women of Bachelor season 25. 25 women who identify as BIPOC were cast on this historic season that was meant to represent change." Their statement goes on to denounce any defense of racism, and they closed it saying, "We stand with Rachel Lindsay, we hear her, and we advocate for change alongside her." So obviously, this is a fairly unprecedented step. As far as I can remember, Mariah, I don't think we've seen contestants band together to speak out on something like this in the past.
Yeah, I love to see that the women are coming together, especially because we haven't seen this kind of collaboration in the past before. They mentioned that this season was supposed to represent change, and what better time for it? So I think that it's awesome to see them come together. They want to hold Bachelor Nation accountable for that change and try to keep moving forward. I also love that they are standing behind Rachel Lindsay and showing her support, especially after such a hard interview that she had to give to one of her close friends. I can only imagine how disappointing that whole experience had to have been for her. So it's nice to see that so many women are really everyone within the Bachelor Nation who's played a role in it is saying, hey, you're not alone in this. We're sharing this weight with you. We appreciate you. Keep doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. So well put. Obviously, the interview and Chris's apology led to even more discussion and attention on Rachel Kirkconnell, her past behavior, these online rumors. It just added more fuel to the fire. People already wanted answers, and now people were basically, demanding them. Rachel, of course, hadn't personally commented on the rumors at all at this point. And that was one of the main issues Rachel Lindsay had. She brought it up in her interview with Chris. She made it clear that nothing in Rachel's contract prevented her from addressing the rumors on her social media, which was sort of a misconception that was being put out there by people defending Rachel online. People claiming to know her. Of course, we don't know exactly, who was making those statements, but it definitely was a defense that sort of pulled weight. And Rachel Lindsay was not having it. She called that out and cleared that up in her interview with Chris. And on Thursday, Rachel finally spoke out with a statement. She posted it to her social media. It was a lengthy post. It was very well said. She acknowledged that her ignorance was racist. She apologized to the communities and individuals who were harmed by her actions and said she is learning and will continue to learn how to be anti-racist. She added, quote, I want to put my energy towards preventing people from making the same offensive mistakes that I made in the first place. And I hope I can prove this to you moving forward. Along with her statement, she also reposted that shared message that the women of her season came together to release. Now, I have to say, when I read her statement, I appreciated the fact that she took accountability. I appreciated the fact that she sort of explained that this was sort of part of the environment that she grew up in, but that doesn't excuse it. I think she really checked all of the boxes. And of course, this is a statement, so it's all about action moving forward. But what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on what she said? And do you think she should have just said something sooner? This was a well-written statement. Could she have saved herself some heat if she would have released this a few weeks ago?
It was a very well written statement. I think the apology covered all of the bases that she really needed to. And you can tell people are already responding to that in a better way. They are already appreciating the fact that she's finally spoken out. I hope that her actions will reflect those words. I think that's what we're all looking for now. I know Rachel Lindsay has mentioned that, she accepts her apology, but she's going to hold her accountable. And I think that's exactly what can be said for anybody who missteps, who needs to kind of make things right and change their ways. Um, so I think, yes, the apology was great. The words were great. It was very well thought out, but I just wish she would have spoken sooner. If it's true that production wasn't keeping her from addressing this, then I just think it would have meant a lot more to people had she gotten behind it the moment that these rumors or truth started circulating. Just get behind that because you're now cast in this light as a public figure, and people were first and foremost probably very hurt. Maybe people who were rooting for you on the season, people who knew you but didn't know you had that kind of background. That's just hurtful, especially considering the women she's sharing this experience with in the house are women who represent the community that she has offended.
Right. No, I totally agree with that. I think that, she had to make an apology. It reached a point where it was crucial that she make a statement. The timing of the statement, of course, is going to be, a cause for question for a while. Why didn't she say something sooner? What was the thought process behind that? I think it definitely adds more questions to an already complicated situation, but definitely it's all going to be about action. Words can just be words. she obviously has some things that she needs to rectify. So I think it's going to be really, really interesting as fans of Bachelor Nation to see where do we go from here? How does she live up to this apology? By Friday, more members of Bachelor Nation began to weigh in on the situation. The men of Tayshia and Claire's season also released a joint statement, sort of following in the footsteps of the women of Matt James's season, which I thought was so moving. Their statement was very similar. They said, "We stand united in denouncing any racist behavior and any defense thereof. We also stand united with the women of season 25." And they said that they stand united with Rachel Lindsay, who led the way. Claire echoed their sentiment and showed support for Rachel on her Instagram story, and Tayshia shared her thoughts on her Instagram stories as well, but also on her Clickbait podcast. She said, quote, "When there are blatant forms of racist acts, you cannot be defensive of it. It speaks volumes, and I just have to say I am really hurt by this response." She also made it clear that she was really moved by the fact that people in the franchise have bound together, stood up and said something. She said, "I appreciate you. Let's do better." So, like I said, many members of Bachelor Nation decided that this was a moment to speak up. They made their disappointment clear. And this has been an ongoing conversation with the Bachelor franchise that change has needed to happen. It is so long overdue. And it just does make me happy to see that the members of this franchise are not going to let them go 2 steps forward, 1 steps back. Like, mistakes have been made, they're clearly still being made. And I think it's important that the members of the franchise are holding the show accountable, holding, anyone within the franchise who steps out of line accountable.
Yeah, I think it's awesome to see a show of numbers too, right? I mean, you every year there's one or two people who had a really bad experience and they come out and they kind of air all of that out, whatever, however they're upset with the production team or however things went down. But to see a show of numbers, everyone come together saying, this isn't right. We don't want to be a part of this. We don't want to be affiliated with a program that moves forward like this, or I guess doesn't move forward at all. So I think that is what's really going to create real change. We all love this program. We love to see people fall in love. We like to see the cute, funny moments. And honestly, we all like to see a little bit of the drama too, if we're being honest. So we want to see this show continue, but we don't want to see it continue in the direction that it's been going for years now, honestly, where it's just about putting people down for the sake of good ratings and where it doesn't stand up in places in our society that it absolutely has to, because we all have a role to play. Every single one of us, it affects all of us, not just one community or the other. So I love that not just the women, but the men and formers are coming together and they're all saying, first of all, Rachel Lindsay, thank you for leading us. Thank you for setting the example and being strong. We follow you, we support you, and they are holding the entire Bachelor franchise accountable for its actions. And I think we're finally going to start to see. I'm actually excited for the next season, if there is a next season, because who knows after all of this. But I'm actually excited if it does continue, because I think that they're not going to have a choice but to maybe get rid of some people, producers, whatever, that play not a very good role. And we're going to start to see a better, more positive, uplifting franchise.
I certainly hope so as well. Obviously, Matt James represented a big step, a lot of change. His season was clearly designed. They cast the most diverse season ever. He was the first Black Bachelor. It was in response to Rachel Lindsay standing up and fighting for change within the franchise. So a lot of people have been curious for Matt's take throughout all of this. When the rumors started, he made a small comment a little while back, basically saying that he hopes that Rachel has a chance to speak on this, but he did not really tiptoe into any of the specifics. And since all of this unfolded, I think a lot of us were waiting to see what he would say, if anything. And on Friday night, he did join the conversation. He shared a post from Rachel Lindsay on his Instagram stories and added the note, "I am beyond grateful to have Rachel as a mentor during this season. Your advocacy of BIPOC people in the franchise is invaluable. I stand with you and the rest of the women in advocating for change and accountability." So I thought it was good that he stepped up and said something. He's been very candid about how before he started his season, he and Rachel had a conversation where she offered him advice about, being himself and how there's no way you can please everybody, but you really have to be your authentic self in this journey. And I really hope to see Matt use the platform he's been given to join Rachel. She's been lending her voice to this cause and fighting for such a long time. I think it's really important to see, like you said, a show of numbers, other people stepping up and continuing to shed light on this message.
Yeah, I agree. I think, again, Rachel has set such a good example, not just for Matt, but for anybody who has ever partaken in the Bachelor franchise, whether that's the Bachelor, the Bachelorette, if they've just been a contestant, or if they've been the lead. So, shout out to Rachel Lindsay for continuing to set the example, for continuing to be a place of support for those who look for it. I agree, Matt has been consistently very candid about everything. And I was glad to finally see him make a statement about it. Not that I was kind of waiting because I'm interested in what he has to say, especially as all of this started with someone that is rumored to have walked away with the final rose. So
Right.
excited to see things move forward. I think things are going to start to look up from here on out. We've already aired out all the dirty and hard stuff. So I'm hoping that things just get back to a good place.
Right. And I mean, you mentioned there are rumors that Rachel, if she doesn't win it, we all know she's going far. So obviously at
Yeah.
some point, I think we're all hoping to see a sit down with Matt and Rachel together or separately and just sort of hear their take on all of this. As members of Bachelor Nation, we're continuing to speak out, furthering this conversation online. We were all sort of waiting for that podcast episode that we knew was coming, where we would get to hear Rachel Lindsay's candid thoughts. And on Friday, a new episode of her Higher Learning podcast did come out. And listen, you guys, there is a lot to unpack. If you have not listened to the episode yet, I highly recommend. She speaks so eloquently. I feel like we can all learn from her every time she really takes on an issue. I know I really listen because she just knows her stuff. I want to just go over some of the highlights, some of the things that really stood out to me. First of all, she really did not hold back in talking about the interview with Chris and, of course, his apology. She did reveal that she and Chris spoke privately after the interview, and she stated that she, of course, appreciates the apology, but she did say, quote, "I'm having a really hard time reasoning or really taking it in and accepting the apology." And she got into why. She explained that after they finished the interview, Chris was happy with it. He texted her after, they went back and forth. He shared, like, I might get some flack, but it's great that we could disagree civilly. So, from where he was sitting after they finished taping that interview, he wasn't panicking. He didn't think, like, oh no, I just put my foot in my mouth. He didn't call his PR. He wasn't strategizing anything. He was comfortable with that. So, she basically explained that she felt like Tuesday was, quote, his truth and Wednesday's apology was a response to the backlash. While they were taping the podcast interview, Rachel actually released her apology statement. So Rachel Lindsay was able to react to that in real time. She explained that she's glad that she said something finally. She said that she thinks her apology puts Chris's to shame, which I thought was an interesting little moment. But she really reiterated and doubled down on the fact that it's all about action. She, appreciated what Rachel said, appreciated the accountability, but now it's about holding her to that, which she said she's going to do. I will add here that she did say, on the other hand, I sort of don't care. It took her a long time to get here. This is great, but I'm tired and, there's a lot going on to deal with. So, interesting opinion there. She also made a fairly big reveal during this episode, which is that she's tired and she's done with Bachelor Nation. She said she just can't take it anymore. She's currently under a contract of some kind. But once that's up, so is she, according to this podcast episode. So, of course, there is a lot to unpack. Mariah, what was your take on what Rachel had to say during this podcast episode?
Well, first, I totally understand why she's not sure if she wants to accept Chris's apology. I mean, I had kind of the same feeling as well. It's like you spoke so intensely and so surely about what you were saying that there's no way that you actually feel that much remorse the next day. It's of course society puts this pressure on anybody who messes up, but to feel so proud of how a conversation went, proud to put your name on that, the statements that he made, it was shocking. So I totally don't blame her for not wanting to accept his apology. And I also really admire that she's just very real to me. She just is very like, no, I don't know if I'm going to accept that, and I love that because that's how things should be. It shouldn't we don't always have to play nice when someone
Mm.
is when someone needs correction because their thoughts and their words are very powerful and very harmful. We can't just forgive that because they don't like that they're receiving some backlash. So I appreciate her honesty, and I think that that is what really promotes change, not just okay, that's going to start taking the heat off of somebody and they may be able to sleep better at night. Um,
Mhm.
Rachel Lindsay, I've been super impressed with her as a host for Extra TV. I think she does an incredible job. I loved her during her season of Bachelorette when she was on The Bachelor. So she is so much bigger than the Bachelor franchise. I'm happy that she's made the decision to just call it quits because if it doesn't bring her any happiness, it doesn't bring me any happiness. So I'm happy that she's going to be rid of that. And I also agree with her about what she said about Rachel Kirkconnell's statement or her apology. It's nice. She worded it really well. It, yes, definitely put Chris's to shame. And you could tell there was a lot of thought put into it. Maybe that's why it took her so long to finally make the apology. Regardless, it's almost an afterthought. If you take too long to make a statement about something that has really affected the country or the world, because everybody follows the Bachelor franchise, and this is very controversial news right now.
I totally agree with you. And of course, all of this leads us to Saturday when Chris made that shocking announcement. He obviously posted another statement. And in it, he announced he's planning on taking a step back. He shared on Instagram another apology to fans and members of Bachelor Nation. Like I said, it's a lengthy statement, but he did say in part, I am so sorry. My words were harmful. I am listening. I truly apologize for my ignorance and any pain it caused you. In addition to his apology, he announced that in an effort to not overshadow the current season of The Bachelor, he's going to be stepping aside for a period of time and is not going to appear in the After the Final Rose special. He said, quote, the historic season of The Bachelor should not be marred or overshadowed by my mistakes or diminished by my actions. So I'm just curious, were you surprised by this? I had this feeling that this conversation is not over. Rachel Lindsay made it clear that she's not sure she's accepting that apology. So to me, that means Chris needs to do something else. So was this the right next step? Is this him, showing that he's not just all talk? He's going to take action. He's going to step aside and, work on educating himself. What are your thoughts?
After watching the initial interview, I think I told you, I was like, I don't know if Chris is going to be able to come back from this. Have
Mhm.
always really liked him on The Bachelor, but now his statements were so shocking. I just don't know how someone can quickly come back from that. It may take some time, for him to kind of rebuild himself and rebuild the way that we see him, especially given the fact that there still are interviews that have to be done after The Bachelor is finalized and somebody walks away with somebody. I don't see how Chris would be able to return to that like things were normal. It would make it more about Chris's return and every statement he made than it would be about what the show is actually about. So I do think it was the right move. I've liked him in the past on these seasons. I think that he's the role that he's played as a host or whatever his official title is within Bachelor franchise, he's done a good job at. He's been entertaining to watch, but I think he would overshadow the true purpose of the show. And I hope that he does take this time to just kind of grow, educate himself, and try to be better. I mean, that's what all of us hope to be. Wasn't surprised by this. I honestly thought, I'm not sure how he's going to come back from this. I mean, as a business, he's the
Mhm.
face of the Bachelor franchise. How can they move forward with this? So I think he made the right call. I think this is the best move for him, his family, and for everyone else who just wants to continue moving forward.
I totally agree. I think it's time for him to, do the work, educate himself for real. We've been talking throughout this about the fact that Rachel may be the winner at the end of the day. So we are expecting, or I think all pretty sure, that there's going to be a sit down conversation with Matt, with Rachel. That conversation is clearly not just going to be about their time on the show. There are a lot of things that need to be brought up. And I certainly think that if Chris was the man, having that conversation, conducting that interview, it would just be almost one too many things. We need to hear from Rachel. We need to hear from Matt. Do we also feel like there's enough space to have Chris taking accountability for his actions in that conversation? It's a lot to bear on one interview. So I'm interested to see who they bring in to do after the final rose. We haven't had any announcements about that yet, but it's going to be a very pivotal moment for the Bachelor franchise, where we go from here, how they approach future seasons. This isn't going to be something people forget about in a week.
Yes, I totally agree. I'm also excited to see who they're going to bring in replacement of Chris. I know Bachelor Nation fans were happy with JoJo's performance. They thought she did a great job. Everyone has loved her in the past and would continue to love her when she returns to Bachelor or Bachelorette. So maybe she'll be filling in for Chris during these times. And I think that's exactly the step in the right direction.
Same. And the other thing that I've been thinking is, spoilers aside, a lot of people I try to avoid spoilers, but this Rachel conversation has, sort of made that impossible. We all are kind of expecting to see at this point her around at the very end, no matter what. So assuming that the people out there claiming that she wins are correct, we've talked a lot about how there's so much pressure on these Bachelor Nation couples, especially couples that sort of spark debate or discussion within the public. And it sometimes makes it almost impossible for them to be set up for success. I mean, if we look back to Claire and Dale, not too far back, just Claire and Dale, they fell in love at first sight. So many people had so much to say about them, so much pressure, so many eyes. And obviously, they didn't end up working out. Is there a world where, after all of this has unfolded, that we think the connection between Matt and Rachel could be strong enough to, outlast all of these questions, all of this digging up from the past, all of this pressure? What do you think?
I don't know how a couple could really survive this, especially given the circumstances in which they've met. You get to know someone a little bit during The Bachelor, but I don't think that you get to know who they are ins and outs. I really don't. So, uh, I also kind of thought, based off of this theory, if Rachel was, let's say she is the one who got the final rose and her and Matt, they were engaged or whatever. I don't think that if they were together when all of these rumors surfaced, or however it all really started or went down, that she would have taken so long to make a statement or an apology. If she was still with Matt, I have a feeling that would be like, oh my gosh, I got to get behind this immediately. And in that case, maybe he would be supportive. But I don't think that. I think that is a good kind of show that maybe they didn't end up together, because why would it take her so long to make an apology based off of offenses she's made on a community that he represents? So I don't know if any couple could survive a hit like this, especially given the fact that they don't have much of a history when they leave The Bachelor. They have just a little bit of experience together, and it's basically just decided, out of all of these people, you're my favorite. I don't think that's enough to really get through something quite like this.
Yeah, I totally agree. It's going to be very interesting to see, first of all, if she wins, if we get that conversation between the two of them, and then, of course, what is going on in both of their lives right now. You guys, we want to know your thoughts on everything that's been going on in Bachelor Nation. How did you feel about Chris's apology, Rachel's statement, Rachel Lindsay's reaction? Let us know down in the comments. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the bell, because we will keep you updated as the story continues to develop. As always, I'm your host, Fiona Zaring. I was joined by the wonderful Mariah Davis. If you want to come say hi, our social handles are on the screen right now. Thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.